All right, everybody, it is Thursday, September 18th, year of our Lord 2025, and we are continuing our 5 days of hate. Let's begin. All right. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are abomination to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. Absolutely beautiful passage. This is essentially an anatomy of an evil person whom it says the Lord hates. Now, good practice. I mean, it's not going to work every single time, but most of the time it will work. And I learned this in Sunday school just the other day. And I knew this before too, but I didn't quite know the proportions here. But anytime you see the Lord, all caps, Yahweh, you need to be thinking Son of God, right? You could, in a way, if it helps you, think of this as there are 6 things that Jesus hates. And read this verse. That'll help you most of the time to understand what is actually being taught about the Old Testament scriptures. It's such. I can't tell you once you wrap your mind around this, that it was Jesus who sent the plagues to destroy Egypt. It was Jesus, the Son of God, technically the Son of God. We understand that the Son of God became incarnate through Mary as Jesus, the Lord. But it just helps you so much. It really does. I don't know what to say. I mean, it's hard to wrap your mind around it, especially if you're trained the way I was trained, but you need to do it. You absolutely need to do it. But I wanted to talk a little bit today about a couple different things. One of them is this idea of polarization, right? I picked up on this immediately last Wednesday when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and I started to see a lot of the usual suspects trying to both sides the issue. Right? They're trying to both sides the issue. There's violence on both sides. Both sides are to blame and all of this. And people started blaming and exclaiming prayers to the Lord to solve our polarization in the United States. Polarization, it's just become too much and all of this kind of stuff. And I picked up on that right away. Jamie Bambrick here, looks like he's a pastor. He posts this, and I definitely agree with this, and I want to expand on it. He says, the polarization of our society is a lie. The polarization of our society is a lie. He says, the right has done everything in its power to persuade and plead with the left not to go down this demented, demonic, self-destructive path. The left has responded with riots, criminal charges, and now bullets. Very, very interesting post, and I completely agree. The situation that we have right now is, let's just make a few assumptions here, right? Let's make a few assumptions, and we're going to make the assumption that we're walking down this path, right? And the path has 2 sides, the left and the right, right? And so what we have here are, let's just assume that the Republicans are walking, right of center. Let's just assume that the center is the truth for a second, because this is really not how it is. But let's just assume that's how it is. Just in our American story, we're just going to give all benefits of doubts, everything like that. We've got the right, and they're right of center. Maybe they're a little bit too far right, but they're right there near the truth. And then we had the left, which was over on the left side of the center. Yeah, they get some things right, they don't get other things right, but we're pretty close together, and that's how it is, right? And we have our little political battles right here, but we're pretty close to the truth, right? This is the story that we've been told for a long time. Again, I'm not endorsing this view of reality because the center is not correct. That's something that you need to probably get through your skull too. I know in school and all of this stuff, the idea is that, it's not that it's left or right. You probably heard this in church too. It's not that it's left or right. It's somewhere in the middle, something like that. And that's not how truth really works, right? But let's just go with the story. So we got the left, right and the left, and we're kind of like this. We're, not too different, similar. We're both kind of fighting over the truth, blah, blah, blah. Okay. What has happened over the years is that the right basically stayed where they are. Right of center, sure, they might get a few things wrong, blah, blah, blah. The left has kind of gone this way. It's gone this way, over the edge of insanity, right? That's the cliff over here, is insanity, left-wing insanity. And so now, by comparison to where we were, now we look super polarized, and you might even say we are polarized, right? Because they're so insane and crazy that our views, which are essentially the same as they've been, have not moved. Now it looks wildly different. And we're holding the line here. And people are blaming polarization on both sides, even though one side has moved. Now, here's the trick of this. Every person blaming polarization, every person, obviously not literally every person, but this is the strategy, though. They're not moving. They're staying crazy. That's what crazy people do. You can't reason with crazy. And we're being told by both the crazies and the leadership on the right, we need to stop the polarization. So what's the way to do that? There's only really one way to do that, and that is to go a little crazy with them. And so you start to move, and you cross the center line of truth, and you close the gap of crazy. And now, polarization isn't so bad, but you're kind of crazy just like the liberals are. But you close the polarization gap. Look, here's the truth. Closing the polarization doesn't solve anything. The only way to realistically do that in our society is to go crazier than you already are, join the liberals. And that's kind of what happens, if you notice. Right? That's kind of what happens. You start to push some gay stuff as a Republican. You start to tolerate some of this and that and all this, and you go crazy with them. Now, you're never going to be quite as crazy as the leftists, but at least you close that polarization gap, right? See, this is polarization is nonsense. Polarization is nonsense. You see, here's the truth. Good and evil are polarized. Good and evil is a polarized society. A society that has good and evil is a polarized society. What are you supposed to do about that? Lament the polarization? No, you don't lament that kind of polarization. What you do is you destroy the evil. And you do it through multiple means, right? I mean, you use the sword of justice if you have to. Right? If that's something that is in your purview, right? You're a soldier, you're a police officer, you're a judge, all these kinds of things. Of course, the church has a role to play. I mean, obviously, we understand that the message of the gospel is how God changes hearts. We understand that. And then, of course, there's politics, which politics is like a replacement war. It's a war, but it should be a bloodless war, right? Politics should be a replacement for that. And so you need to engage yourself. If this is what you do, you're involved in the political process, you're at war, essentially. You're at war. And this is the thing about warriors, right? Like, if you're a warrior, you're actually a soldier. There's things that, it's not that you compartmentalize your life, but there's things that you do when you're at war and you're on the battlefield, and there's ways that you act, and there's aggression that you take and you used for good and all this stuff that you wouldn't probably do at home or in your church or at the PTA meeting or whatever it is, right? But you have to understand that there's different lanes and there's different aspects of your life and all of these kinds of things. And I think you have to have room for that in the church, right? Are there any veterans in your church, right? Or maybe any active duty in your church, right? You understand that the way you judge as a fellow believer, what those people do on the battlefield versus what they do in Sunday school, it's different because there's different contexts. Now, of course, there's morality and there's still standards and guidelines and an expectation of a certain level of behavior on the battlefield too. But you can easily see why it's a little different, right? It's a little different. I mean, you're going to be doing things on the battlefield that you would never do in Sunday school because it's completely different context, right? But of course, you can sin on the battlefield too, but you understand that there's different ways to there's different roles that people are playing at any given time, even like police officers, right? You have police officers in your church. Similar kind of thing. And so likewise, we need to have room in politics for similar kinds of stuff, right? Obviously, again, it's a bloodless war, but it's a war. And so you need to make room for politics amongst the brethren. I mean, it's very, very obvious that this needs to be done. And so this whole idea of polarization, polarization, it's the blame for everything. And to solve polarization, really, there's only one realistic way to do that, and that's to become more liberal, which is why you often see the leftist potential alleged Christians that talk in this way. It's the Mike Cospers of the world that talk this way, because what their goal is, this is the thing you need to understand, what their goal is to get the church to be more liberal, more leftist than they are. That's their goal. Everything that they say, every word that comes out of their mouth is about that goal. They want to close the polarization. They'll even tell you that they're blaming polarization. And then the words and the effort and what they do tries to get you to become more crazy like the leftists that are crazy. And that's their plan to close the polarization. And they believe that that's being more faithful. But the truth is that the center is not the truth, right? That's not the truth, right? Because Christians have a much more accurate way to see the world and what happens in the world and what should happen and morality and stuff like that. And so the truth is that the truth, what's actually true, reality, is right wing. That is what right wing is. And so you better be polarized as a right winger, because if you're not close to the truth. It's not the case that the left wing is okay, the right wing is okay. They're both a little different. They're both off in different ways. It's true, the right wing is off in certain ways, but all of the ways that the right wing is off is because they're too liberal for reality. They're too left wing for reality. And so what's going on is really that the truth is over here. Left-wingers are over here in la-la land. Right-wingers are to the right of the left-wingers, closer to the truth. But all the ways that they're wrong from the truth is because they're too close. They're too unpolarized with the left wing. They're too crazy, essentially. They're too similar to the crazy left-wingers. That's the problem. And so really what needs to happen is we need to get actually more polarized, because we need to be more in line with the truth, with reality, with God's creation, with the way that God has created, with God's commands. We actually need to be more polarized. And I believe if we do that, this is my opinion, I believe if we actually increase the polarization, step up the pressure, increase the rhetoric, increase the action, turn the heat up, whatever analogy you want to use, whatever metaphor you want to use, increase the temperature, I personally believe that what will happen is that these people over here, a lot of them will go crazy. A lot of them will get worse and worse. And of course, as we get more in line with God's truth, we will destroy that stuff. But I think we'll actually drag a lot of people that are left-wingers more towards the truth with us. In fact, we will increase the polarization, and then it'll start to shrink again. Because when we actually do what God requires us to do with murderers, with abortion, which again, I mean, it's just the same thing, murderers. When it comes to pagan worship, when it comes to all of these kinds of things, when we actually start to do that, the law actually does work. And when people start to fear doing evil in our country, because right now, one of the problems that we have is that people are starting to not fear doing evil. They're starting to actually think it's pretty safe. In fact, maybe I'll even get a reality TV show about my life because I'm flaunting God's laws so aggressively. Maybe I'll get on Chip and Joanna Gaines' show because I'm a homosexual. You know what I mean? That's a really cool way to be special and stuff like that. They not only do they not fear it, but it actually can benefit them in some way. But when people start to fear, right? When they start to fear what might happen when they actually, go out there and assassinate a Christian, an evangelist, what might happen if they, do these kinds of evil, wicked things, I think that a lot of them will give that stuff up. And it might not change their heart, but I'm not really worried about that in this context. As in this context, it's all about having a society that upholds justice, that hates evil and loves good. And I think a lot of those people will have heart changes, but that's not really what I'm talking about right now. That's the role of the church, right? And of course, it's central to the life of a Christian. Of course, I care about it. That's not what I'm talking about right now, though. I'm talking about politics. I think people will have heart changes, though. I think they will. And so this is not the time to be lamenting polarization. This is not the time to be trying to close the gap of polarization. No, this is the time to increase the pressure, to raise the temperature, to increase the polarization, because we are so far from reality, even as conservatives, that the only way to fix this is to get more in line with God's creation, more in line with God's commands, increase the pressure. If you're an abolitionist, go in even further, right? Go in even further. I know you guys are going to do it anyway, so you don't need me to tell you, but do it. Do it. And then as that polarization kind of reaches its point, my position, my belief, my opinion is that yes, the left wing will rage and they'll go crazy and they're not going to go out without a fight, but we will put it to an end to it. We will destroy it, and then what's left over will come closer to us, closer to the truth. And they may never join us, but it's much better to have a situation where we're over here, there's some separation, but we're closer to reality than the situation that we're in when we're all kind of far away from reality, but we're closer to the crazy. If that makes sense. In any case, I hope you found this video helpful. God bless.
Fuego, mi amor por ti es puro fuego. Fuego, puro fuego es mi amor por ti.